What is up, everybody? This is Adam. Welcome back to Fouled Out. Matt is joining me here in just a minute to break down our favorite prospects of the 2023 NFL Draft. This is the My Guys podcast that we love to do so much every year. But first, just wanted to say the schedule for the next couple podcasts. This is going to come out on Wednesday, the 12th. I will be back on Saturday to power rank the 8 NBA playoff series for the first round. Wasn't going to get back into basketball until we were done with the NFL draft stuff, but the Kings are in the playoffs for the first time in 16 years. First time since I was literally 16 years old and I didn't have a podcast back then. So I have to talk about it. Had to find a way to talk about it. So I will be back power ranking the playoffs and talking about what my favorite series are, who I think is going to win, all of that on Saturday. And then Matt and I will be back next Wednesday to do our NFL draft gambling show, give you all of our favorite bets for the NFL draft. So it's going to be fun. Couple good podcasts coming up, including this one, which is one of our favorite ones to do every year. So let's go. All right, Matt is here for one of our favorite podcasts of the year, the 2023 NFL Draft, My Guys podcast. I know the fans of the podcast don't know which players we're going to talk about. And for the first time ever, I also don't know which players we're going to talk about because somebody, and I'm not going to name names, did not send me a full list of players for this podcast.
Hey, I gave you like over half.
Yeah, I have 4 out of 6. So it's going to be a surprise for all of us. And there's going to be some live reaction components to this later in the pod. But besides that, how are you, my friend?
Good. I spent the weekend helping my sister get across the state to get a car. So kind of slipped between the couch cushions. But yeah, I'm excited for this. Ironically, like I had my 3 main players like picked out a long time ago. 2 of the 3 I was in love with from Senior Bowl. Like I was just set then and there. So
The funny thing about this year is that like you and I come at this from very different directions.
mm-hmm.
And this is the first year where you have someone on your list who I wanted to put on my list. And I have someone on my list you wanted to put on your list, but only one of us could have them. So like we kind of divided up the 2 guys. But typically our lists don't overlap. Like we'll have like both have 6 guys and it's both 6 separate guys. I went back and listened to this pod from last year, the 2022 draft. And of the 12 guys that we picked, 8 of them were significant impact players. Of those 8, 5 made the all-rookie first team this past season. Devon Lloyd, Chris Olave, Jalen Petrie, Kenneth Walker, and Tariq Woolen. The 3 who did not make the all-rookie first team were Jaquan Brisker, George Pickens, and Brian Robinson. So, like, pretty damn good players still, even though they weren't on the all-rookie first team. So, if you get your name called on this podcast, it's a good thing for you. It's a good thing for us. We put a lot of work into this episode every year, and it's a labor of love because it's a lot of research to do this, but it's a lot of fun research.
Yeah.
When we pick these guys, it's not necessarily like, I think that this corner or this wide receiver is going to be the best one in the draft, or this is, guaranteed to be an all-pro rookie first team guy. These are guys that we really enjoy for one reason or another, guys that we think are going to be successful in the long term in the NFL. But it is pretty cool when you nail them like year one and you can come back on the podcast next year and be like, yeah, like we had 8 dudes who were significant impact players in their first season.
Yeah. It's a good feeling.
I'll let you go first because your number one guy is someone that I wanted to put on my list as well. So I'll just start by saying that I co-sign Matt's analysis here.
My first player and the news today about the Lions making a trade made it extremely clear that he is very likely headed to Detroit. Is cornerback Devon Witherspoon from Illinois. And when I watch him, the thing that jumps out to me is, man, does this guy play football exactly like Darrelle Revis? Like, and I know that saying that is probably putting me in harm's way because obviously he has a long way to be Darrelle Revis. However, that like extremely physical nature with which he plays. Obviously he's a little bit undersized, probably even more so than Darrelle Revis was, but like they handle it the same way, and he just bullies the receiver the entire time, and that is exactly the way the Detroit Lions want their outside corners to play football. He is very, very adept at playing that style of football. You see a lot of guys who play that style in college, and they get pretty handsy, and you see like, oh yeah, they're gonna get it, some flags in the NFL. Like you know that. And I mean, Rocky Sim is a perfect example of that. He is a holding machine. But like Devon Witherspoon is able to play that style without being in a position where he needs to hold all the time. That is an incredibly valuable asset.
Yeah, I co-sign anybody that is big on one of the Illinois DBs
Yep.
who are coming out in this draft. I like all of them. There's Devon Witherspoon, and then there's the two safeties who came out as well.
Yeah.
They kind of fit into my big fish, small pond theory. Not as well as one of the guys I'm going to talk about in a little while, but
yeah,
Illinois had one of their better seasons in quite some time this past season, largely on the strength of their defense, especially the defensive secondary. And then their running back, Chase Brown, was basically the entire offense. I could see Witherspoon being the Sauce Gardner type of guy who comes in year one and is like, boom, immediate impact. A lot of the same traits. He's obviously a lot smaller than Sauce, but the perimeter man coverage skills are insane.
Yeah.
To watch. And that's like what Sauce was so good at, is like, hey, we're going to bring this guy in. He's going to play man coverage on the outside and just shut people down right away.
Yeah. Well, you just don't see these guys who are that physical and bully the receiver the entire time, and they run the route for the receiver.
You know, if it's someone like Sauce Gardner and it's like, oh yeah, he's bullying guys on the outside, it's like, okay, yeah, he's 6'4", he's like a big dude.
Yeah.
Witherspoon's like 5'11".
Yeah.
Which is good corner size. You know, that's not bad for a corner, but it's not like a huge corner like a Brandon Browner who's out there like beating people up.
Right.
He's smaller, and it's like, it's not only the skills with him, but it's the attitude.
Yep.
You gotta love. Like, that's like one of the first things that pops out to me on his scouting report is like tone setter on defense.
Oh, yeah.
And to have someone like that on the outside, like, you need that in the NFL.
I don't necessarily always love guys that are super mouthy, and that is not true at all for cornerbacks and wide receivers, because it's a constant chess match back and forth all game long with those two positions trying to get in each other's heads. And like, I think in order to be one of the best cornerbacks in the NFL, you need to be overly verbal. He starts the tone by like all but literally hitting the receiver in the mouth. He's running his mouth the whole game. And then, like, he's got no problems about coming down and being effective in the run game.
Yeah, 8 tackles for a loss as was it redshirt sophomore, his third season.
Yeah.
Another 2.5 this season. He can play in the slot. He can play on the outside. The NFL is a team sport, except for when you're covering a receiver one-on-one.
Yeah.
Like when you're in man coverage and you're out on that island, you need to have that attitude. You got to have that swag because it's like half of it is a confidence game. Like you have to have that cocky attitude of like, I can shut this guy down. I'm taking this dude out. And that's what made big time corners like, a Richard Sherman or like even Sauce Gardner last year to some degree. That's what made these guys so good is that they have that irrational confidence. That's like, don't come out here because you're not going back.
Like I said, like he runs routes for receivers. He's very aggressive with attacking the ball. If he ends up in Detroit, his defensive backs coach is going to be Dre Bly. That was all Dre Bly did was take the ball away. I love the way that this guy like is just so aggressive in everything that he does. Because this is an aggressive game. And the second you pull back is the second you give your opponent the advantage.
I agree. I think I'm looking at his scouting report right now. I think the weaknesses on his scouting report are so funny. So it says he can be overeager to make a play at times.
Yep.
And the other one is, and they like a weakness on his scouting report is will teams try to make him play slot corner?
Yeah.
Don't do it.
No.
Just don't do it. Like if it's a potential weakness that like, oh, he might get stuck at slot corner in the NFL. Don't play him at slot corner. Like it doesn't seem like it's that hard. We make this way harder than it has to be.
No. Like if someone is the best corner in one of the best cornerback drafts we've seen in a very long time, they're an outside corner. Just because they can play slot corner doesn't mean you should put them there.
Yeah, and it's like he's excellent in man-to-man coverage.
Yeah.
He's good in zone, but not as good as he is in man. It's like, okay, you know what he's good at?
Yeah.
Play him in man on the outside. Boom. If you need a slot corner, don't draft him.
Yeah.
Not that he can't play slot, but like this is how guys get wasted.
Yeah.
In the NFL.
It's fine for you to go into game day and say, hey, Devon, your job today is Justin Jefferson over there. You see him? Yeah. Go fuck him up.
It's so nice to have a guy like that. Like you talked about Darrelle Revis. The Patriots had Darrelle Revis for a season. And the beautiful thing about it was just like, we don't have to worry about that part of the game plan.
Yeah.
It's like, we're going to put Darrelle Revis on their best receiver and we can focus on everything else. And that's why we won a Super Bowl that year.
Yeah. Cause like, okay, that great receiver goes into the slot. If you have that guy and that guy can actually go into the slot and be effective, you can build your roster to have other guys that can play outside corner in a pinch to make that work. Like it's not like an insurmountable thing to do roster building wise. So God, just having that chess piece is incredible.
Yeah, I like it. I co-signed this pick. He was going to be on my list if he wasn't on yours. So let's go to my first guy. I'm going to go to the opposite side of the cornerback wide receiver battle. This is so us. Is that your first pick would be a corner? My first pick would be a wide receiver.
I mean, you saw my 3 picks for my 3 mains, and did it surprise you?
No.
the positions?
No, it didn't at all. I was just like, yeah, that makes sense. And then I don't think my picks are going to shock anybody either, if
No.
you've listened to me talk about prospects on this podcast before. But I teased this last week that this is a weak wide receiver class, but that I did think there was one guy in the class who had potential to be a superstar pretty quickly
Yeah.
in the NFL. My first guy is Ohio State wide receiver Jaxson Smith-Njigba. If you've listened to the podcast for a while, you've probably heard me talk about him for over a year. I talked about him in last year's draft, about how excited I was to see him this season. He didn't play very much in the college football season, so his stock is down a little bit. But honestly, I don't even think we'd be having this conversation if he had played this year. Like, there's potential he could be picked like somewhere between 15 and 20.
Mm-hmm.
If he had played this year, I don't think he'd be getting outside the top 10.
Yeah.
The words that pop off the scouting report: generational agility. He ran a 3.93 shuttle and a 6.57 3-cone, which are both over the 99th percentile for agility scores. And if you know anything about me and what I value in receivers, you know what the next line is going to be. He's an extremely polished route runner.
Yeah.
Who are the other route runners I love? Justin Jefferson, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Cooper Kupp. These are all guys I've talked about in the past. Route running is like the number one translatable skill going into the NFL. Every year we see guys who it says great route runner on their scouting report, and they're instantly successful. Last year, my big guy with this was Chris Olave, because he was a polished route runner, but he also had like blazing fast speed.
Yep.
Jackson's not that fast, but the route running is like, it's beautiful. It's something you consistently see with these wide receivers who come out of Ohio State, is just like the detail and the sharpness of the route running is beautiful. And that's why they're so successful right away.
The pop that he has in those cuts is quite impressive. Like, it actually reminds me a lot of Garrett Wilson from last year. It's just, God, that pop and the precision combined is a very dangerous combination. I find myself wondering, like, how did Marvin Harrison Jr. kill JSN's draft stock? I feel like he was valued more coming into the season than he is now.
I 100% agree. And that's kind of the thing. Like, he didn't play this year, and he had like a nagging hamstring injury. Like, he could have played through it, and he kind of protected his draft stock a little bit, trying to protect himself. I don't know. I don't love that, but I'm not going to blame anybody.
Yeah.
After the things we've seen happen to players who try to like play a bowl game.
I just don't think it helps when you have another younger receiver in that offense, like putting up the kind of numbers that Marvin Harrison Jr. did. And like it almost like from a very like zoomed out perspective kind of takes away the value of JSN's success there, which is the wrong takeaway from that, because he is a very, very polished and talented receiver. I think his range starts at 8. I would not be surprised if he ended up in Atlanta. There's a number of guys I could see going there, so it's not saying a whole lot. But if he went in the top 10, I'd have a hard time seeing any of those teams being particularly disappointed.
Yeah, it's funny that you bring up Marvin Harrison Jr., because what Marvin Harrison Jr. did to JSN's draft stock, JSN was basically that guy for Chris Olave and Garrett Wilson. Because I want to remind people that JSN played with Garrett Wilson and Chris Olave, not this past season, but the season before, and led that team in catches and yards. and that Chris Olave and Garrett Wilson both said he is the best receiver in this room. Like,
Yeah.
this guy is the truth. And, like we were talking about with corners, wide receivers don't just say that shit.
No.
Wide
They are
receivers
egomaniacs.
They're egomaniacs. They're divas. They're not going to say that, like, oh, yeah, that guy's better than me, unless, like, he really is better than them.
Yeah.
So, I'm not saying he's going to come in and have the same impact that those two guys had last year, because they both had such excellent wide receiver, like rookie wide receiver seasons.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I don't think that stuff lies. Everybody respects him. Everybody in Ohio State is just like, yeah, he's like the best guy who's come through here amongst all the guys. And that includes
a litany of high-end NFL talent.
So many guys. So his weaknesses, they say he lacks like top end speed and size. The size thing is going to be a theme for me with my guys, is that, like, we'll talk about this with one of my other prospects a little bit later, but because of where the game is going and how it's played in space nowadays, I don't think size is as important as it used to be.
Yeah.
He also ran a 4.48 at his pro day, which is like pretty good. It's not like elite wide receiver speed, but it's like, I look back at some other scouting reports for quote unquote similar players.
Mm-hmm.
Justin Jefferson was also listed as lacks elite wide receiver speed. He ran a 4.43.
Yeah.
But like a lot of the same notes as JSN, like too much slot production, not enough on the outside, has to win with like routes and body control, which, like, I don't understand how has to win with routes and body control has become a bad thing. Like, another one, Amon-Ra St. Brown was a guy I was big on a couple years ago.
Yeah.
His weaknesses were listed as very average quickness and long speed, wins with body control, and is a good route runner and a smooth athlete. These are all the same notes that we hit with JSN.
Yep. It blows my mind how nobody ever fucking learns.
We'd make the same mistakes we don't make the same mistakes every year on this podcast.
No.
We learn. We know what's important in receivers. But every year it's like,
it's
good. Yeah, it's like he's a little undersized. He wins with like routes and body control.
Yeah.
Like he has late hands, great hands, but like good ball tracking. We see the same notes every year, and yet we see guys like Amon-Ra St. Brown go in the fourth. We see Justin Jefferson go 23rd overall. Like, it helps to have the elite athleticism of a Jamar Chase. You don't have to have that to be successful in the NFL.
My counter to anyone pushing back on us, poo-pooing the hyper-athleticism kind of argument is like, like being super athletic, being super fast, all that stuff, it makes a player better than they would be with that same skill set without it, right? But if you cannot use that speed to the best of its capability, then it doesn't mean shit. I mean, John Ross did literally nothing in the NFL. He's the fastest player ever.
I swear to God, literally my next line was going to be, tell me how John Ross is doing right now.
Yeah. And I mean, obviously a different position, but like player that comes to mind, like Jared Davis was very fast as a linebacker for his size. He had no problem moving, but he couldn't use it effectively, so he overran everything. If you're a receiver and you have all this speed, but you're rounding off all your routes, you're just doing cornerbacks favors all day long. And what's going to happen inevitably is you're going to round a route. The corner is going to be sitting on that route. They're going to undercut it, and they're going to pick off the pass, and the quarterback's going to be pissed off at you.
I feel like some of these scouting reports are written by people who haven't watched football before. We'll talk about
AI generated.
Yeah, we'll talk about a few more funny ones later, but it's like someone typed in something to like Chat GPT and like this is what popped out. And they're just like, it
Yeah,
sounds good. So uh yeah, so we agree on that one. Let's go to your second guy.
to kind of stick with the theme of guys who, I don't know, maybe a little undersized. I think he's kind of grown into his body a little bit more than was expected, but that is going to be uh, linebacker Daiyan Henley from Washington State. I'm a diehard Lions fan, and if you have watched any meaningful quantity of games of the Lions over the last decade, the one constant is that nobody can fucking cover a tight end to save their life. And what Daiyan Henley is a tight end eraser. He's got a background playing safety, and obviously he grew into a bigger body. And I love the athleticism that he plays with. I love that he does have the speed. He's certainly not the kind of linebacker that you are expecting to kind of stack and shed blockers in the box, but we are playing in more and more of a horizontal football game every year. Daiyan Henley is absolutely made for that horizontal game. More and more teams are trying to find that tight end that is a huge weapon. And if your defense doesn't have a counter for that weapon, then they're just going to feed Travis Kelce and you are just not going to be able to do anything about it. Having another chess piece like that is monumental in terms of play calling.
Yeah, I was reading his scouting report. So like when I go to look into these players, I
Yeah.
read scouting reports from multiple sources and then
Yeah.
I watch the film as if he's someone that I like and I'm trying to find positives, and I watch the film as if he's someone I don't like and I want to find negatives. So I was reading his scouting report, and the first thing is like he's a converted wide receiver. And I was like, he's a converted what? He's
Yeah.
a linebacker. So that
Yeah.
tells you about the athleticism, though, is that
Yep.
he came in as like a 2-star prospect to Nevada at
Yep.
wide receiver and converted over to linebacker. And I'm going to steal the analysis that I did for a couple different players a couple of years ago. Last year with Tariq Woolen, he was a wide receiver who converted to corner, which is much more normal than a wide receiver converting to a linebacker. But Tariq Woolen, basically what I said is I was like, listen, he's been playing corner for 2 years and he's already this good.
Yeah.
And it's the same thing with Henley, is that like he was awesome at linebacker for Washington State last
Yep.
year. And it's like he's only been playing linebacker a couple years and he's
Yeah.
already this good, where he's probably going to be like a day 2 pick.
There is probably a fair amount of statistical backing for the statement that, like, okay, well, guys who, like, you're not really sure what they are they linebacker, are they safety, typically don't work out. And my counterpoint to that is that's not the player. The coaches are the ones who failed there. And we know what Daiyan Henley can do. We know that he can flow with horizontal run games. We know that he can drop and cover. We know we can cover tight ends. We know that he takes the ball away. His interviews at the Senior Bowl, like, we know he's got like a great personality. We know his values, teamwork, and all that stuff. And he even said, like, at the Senior Bowl, like, yeah, we're trying the hardest we can, but like I also am cognizant of the fact that all of these guys are waiting on a future payday, and I don't want anyone to get hurt. Like, that to me speaks to me as a young man who is very grounded. unlike maybe another player that we talked about last week, that's a makeup for a guy who can really grow at the next level. I'm not expecting him to come in to the NFL next year and be, a Pro Bowl caliber linebacker, but I think that he'll be functional. I think that he will definitely be in sub packages and execute his role well as he spends more and more time in the NFL working on his craft. I think he's going to take it seriously enough that he actually gets better, because not all of these guys do it. Like, there's a lot of guys who, like, this is just a job for them. They show up, they do their job, they go home.
Do your rate and hit the gate. Yeah, the other piece of past draft analysis from us that I wanted to steal was that a couple of years ago we talked about Isaiah Simmons coming into the NFL and basically said, like, listen, this guy is a chess piece that you're going to have to move around. You got to find unique ways to use him. He's a Swiss Army knife. He has all these tools, but if you put him at middle linebacker and say, hey, you should play traditional linebacker, that he's not going to work out, even though he was like a top 10 pick. And for a couple of years now, the Cardinals have just been like, yeah, this is your role. Just like play your role. Mm-hmm. Cool. And
like, he's gotten better at it, but like, he's not.
But it was never what he was meant to do.
He needs to be not the player he was expected to be for where he was drafted. Right. And that's not fair to Isaiah Simmons to put that on him. And also, like, you drafted him because you saw what he can do. Right. But let's take a page out of basketball and throw positions out of here. You know what he does well. So put him on the field and put him in those positions on various given plays to do those things that he does well. And then you can figure out all the other stuff around that. Because a talent like that doesn't come around often. And unfortunately, it seems like it might get wasted.
Yeah. Well, it's the same thing with him. And it's the same thing I want to say about Daiyan.
Yeah.
It's the old Bill Belichick adage of don't tell me what he can't do. Yeah. Tell me what he can do, and I will put him in a position to succeed. And it's going to be the same thing for Daiyan in the NFL that I said, that we said for Isaiah Simmons years ago, is that if he goes to a team that's willing to use him in diverse ways, he will be very successful. Mm-hmm. If he goes to a team that says, you're going to be a 4-3 outside linebacker, here's what we want you to do, and like, this is your role, he may not be very successful. Yeah. Like, he's unique. Use him uniquely. We're going to talk about that with another guy I got coming up too. But like, we know what he's good at. Use him at the things he's good at. It doesn't seem that hard.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a pretty simple concept, but it's asking people to, I don't know, use their intellect. And I think that there's still a number of coaches in the NFL that they still lean very heavily on the old ways. And those things are very quickly proving to not be very effective.
Listen, as long as Matt Patricia is coaching in the NFL, you cannot convince me that I couldn't do a better job as an NFL coach. You can't convince me that I wouldn't be a good NFL coach, because Matt Patricia just keeps getting hired.
He really does.
Really does.
It's incredible.
Yeah. Well, let's go to my second guy so that we don't have to talk about Matt Patricia.
Yeah. You took us to a dark place.
That's its own podcast. My second guy is Dalton Kincaid, tight end from Utah. He's pretty much only on this list because he has the same last name as my nephew, Marshall.
It is quite hilarious that we really just keep going, like, the order of this is cornerback to wide receiver to Tight end to racing linebacker to tight end.
This is why we're so good together. It's like we're like a natural foil for each other.
This was not intentional either.
No, but it's a thing of beauty. During college football season every year, as I'm watching the games, I keep a list of prospects that I like specifically for this podcast. I first saw Dalton Kincaid actually last year, but really this year in the Florida game. It was Utah's first game of the season at Florida. And I put him on my list immediately. And he stayed at the top of my list since then. And he's only cemented himself through the draft process. I know he's a guy who's flying up a lot of people's boards. And I think people are going to look at this podcast and be like, well, Adam, you picked the number one wide receiver and the number one tight end. Like, of course, these are your guys. I'm like, okay, but these guys have been on my list for over a year. So just bear with me. But the reason that he is on my list is because I watched a lot of Utah this season, especially the Florida game, the 2 USC games, along with a couple other like Pac-12 after dark. Utah's on late and nothing else is on. So I watched that. He was the go-to guy for them in every big situation on offense. Need a first down in the red zone, third and long. They were always looking for Dalton Kincaid. And I feel like that's why it's so important that we actually watch the college football games and watch these guys play during the season, is because like film is great and film and scouting reports can tell you a lot. But just that feeling of like, okay, I bet against Utah and it's 3rd and 13 and this fucking guy keeps burning me.
Yeah.
That's a true story. I bet on Florida to start the season.
To kind of add on to that point of like watching the game and the flow of the game like being really important. I will say JT O'Sullivan does a really, really good job of like pointing stuff like that out in his film analysis. If that is something that someone is interested in, the QB school is really, really great at that, because that is a super important part for evaluating quarterbacks.
Yes. Well, and that's kind of what I'm getting at too, is like I can turn on film and be like, oh, like this is a 3rd and 13 and they went to him over the middle and he converted it.
Yeah.
Like that's great. It doesn't have that same feeling of like, I'm watching the game. This is a big play in this game. Like if Utah does not make this play, they're going to lose.
Yeah.
You don't get that. Like people can tell you that while you're watching film. You don't get that feeling in like your gut of like, oh shit, this is nut up or shut up time.
Yeah.
And when it came to that, Dalton Kincaid nutted up, man. He was awesome.
Yeah.
For them. So
yeah. I mean, like the dynamic there that you're talking about is very reminiscent of Travis Kelce and Mark Andrews.
Yep.
Like,
and similar to them, he projects as a very versatile, unique weapon at the NFL level.
Mm-hmm.
He's a fluid athlete, fantastic route runner from the tight end position. Like one of the better route running tight ends that we've seen come out in quite some time. Separates from coverage using his athleticism and his routes. He's sharp out of his breaks. He can stretch the defense. He's a vertical threat at the tight end position. He's got run after the catch ability. All of the things that you want from a tight end in the receiving game. The weakness here, again, he's a little undersized. He's not ideal for a tight end. And the blocking is not great. He is not an inline tight end. You're not going to put him at the end of the line of scrimmage and he's going to run block for you and also run routes.
Yeah.
But like, this is the same thing I just said about Daiyan. If you need an inline tight end, don't draft him. There are other guys in this draft who are going to be much better inline tight ends.
We will talk about that.
One we're going to talk about in a minute. He's more of like I don't think he's going to be as good as like a Travis Kelce, obviously, because that's like a generational tight end player. But I think of like a Zach Ertz like high end Zach Ertz, low end Mike Gesicki,
Yeah.
athletic tight end who can play like in the slot. You can put him in line if he's going to run a route. You don't want him, he's not Gronk. He's not going to like block for you as like another tackle, basically. But like he's functional from like a stock blocking perspective. If you put him like in the slot, put him at H back, put him out wide, move him around kind of thing.
Yeah.
That's where he's going to shine. I
Yeah.
I almost feel like it's a sin for me to say this comp. So I just want everybody to bear with me for a minute because this is an on-field comp. I think about how the Patriots used to use Aaron Hernandez before he killed all those people. It's a tough
Oh
comp.
boy.
Tough comp, man.
Just you did this to yourself.
I know. But that like 2013, 2014 Patriots time when they had Gronk was like the inline tight end, Aaron Hernandez was like the kind of flex guy. You would see him line up in the backfield and line up in the slot and line up as like an H back and a wing back. Don't use Dalton Kincaid as an inline tight end.
Yeah.
Don't do it. It's not going to help. We know what he's good at. Use him at the things he's good at because he's really, really fucking good at those things.
I will say Dalton Kincaid is not my favorite tight end in this draft because of that. Because the blocking aspect of playing tight end is something that I value a lot, which might be a little bit of foreshadowing about which tight end I'm going to talk about. But man, like you're not going to find much better at the out in space pass catching abilities from the tight end position than you're going to get out of Dalton Kincaid. And I mean, it's just like what we talked about with Daiyan Henley. Like, you know exactly what he does well. So focus on that. Yeah, I get that, like, it's really hard to run an NFL offense without ever putting your star tight end in line, but like, don't make that the norm. Like, it's not you can have other guys on your roster for that.
Yeah, I actually feel like his draft stock would be higher if I told you he's a 6'4", 246-pound slot receiver.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like people would just be like, oh, that's sweet. I feel like because of the position label, people are like, yeah, that's not really big enough for a tight end. But you shouldn't be using him as a traditional tight end anyway.
Yep.
So, like, I don't care that he's undersized for an inline tight end because he's not an inline tight end.
Yeah.
Like, it pisses me off. Just makes me so mad. But let's go to your third guy.
We're going to go a little bit beefier here. My next guy, and he's another one that I fell in love with from the Senior Bowl. Keeanu Benton, the defensive tackle from Wisconsin. I mean, he is the proverbial immovable object. And man, does that guy play with power. And I will say, like, even on passing downs, he's got a little bit more there than I expected out of him. Certainly not expecting him to turn into Aaron Donald, but what he offers is versatility for the other guys that can be on that defensive line, because he's going to take up two guys in the run game. You need a guy like that in order to get away with a defensive tackle next to him. One that a lot of people like in this draft, like Elijah Cansey, like, if you don't have the beef next to a guy like that, then they have no chance. What Keanu Benton does so well is he allows everybody else to do their job better. And there's a reason why most defensive tackles don't go very early in the draft. I mean, Jordan Davis was like a profound prospect of his type, and he still didn't go anywhere close to top 10 because like they do dirty work. They're not flashy. They don't do stuff that typically earns very big contracts. But Keeanu Benton is going to day one plug up holes in the run game on your defense and set up your pass rushers to be able to rush the passer. And he's got a little bit of upside to grow into being a pass rusher. He has definitely shown the ability to push the pocket, and like he's going to be a very good player in the NFL as long as he wants to play.
I feel like he's going to be one of those guys who's like a you don't know what you got till it's gone type of player
Yeah.
on a lot of rosters because he's going to be like a starting nose tackle for a long time.
Yeah.
Because like you said, like he's going to do so many good things that don't necessarily show up on a stat sheet.
Yep.
And people are going to be like, oh, like, like more casual fans are going to be like, yeah, he's not really that good. He doesn't really like look at his stats. He doesn't really do that much. And then as soon as he's not on your defense anymore, you'd be like, why is our front seven such shit this year?
Yeah.
After like the whole front seven took a step back and like whatever team he goes to all of a sudden has like a really good run defense.
Yeah.
And it's like there's stuff beyond the stat sheet, which is sometimes a weird thing for me to say because I'm such like a stats oriented person. But like you have to recognize that the total impact of a player doesn't necessarily show up in stats. And he's going to be one of those guys. It's just like the whole defense is better because he's on it, even if it doesn't pop on a stat sheet for you.
Like he's a guy too that like he got better too. I think this past year, he got a lot better with his hands. He put more like counter moves into place. You saw him a lot less frequently getting stagnant. You don't see that with every prospect. There's definitely an element of like growth actually being a like personality characteristic rather than just like a thing that happens over time. And I think he does that really well. Also, obviously, when I'm looking at prospects, I'm looking at it from the viewpoint of being a fan because I can never turn that off. And as a Lions fan, when Keeanu Benton shows up to media day at the combine and says the word grit like 7 times, like I don't know how you don't love that.
Yeah, in high school, he qualified for states in wrestling twice.
Yeah.
That teaches you not only about like leverage and about like using your hands and stuff like that, but also the conditioning that you build.
Yeah.
So he qualified for the state champions twice at 285 pounds. Now he plays at like 310-ish. 315. Yeah, he's
depending on the day.
Yeah, I just like any scouting report that says incredible raw power.
He is heavy-handed. He's a fun watch, and I definitely get excited just thinking about the idea of having him play next to a Lee McNeil, because that's gross.
It is funny that like the guys we pick for this podcast tend to be guys that play positions of needs for our favorite teams. Because but it's just natural. Like you said, like we are fans first and foremost. And that's the point of this podcast is for us to fan out about stuff.
That's the point of being into any of this.
Right. But like you just look into that position group a little bit deeper. It's like, oh, the Patriots need a wide receiver. Who's my favorite wide receiver? And then you just end up like falling in love with that guy. So let's talk our last in-depth guy, my third guy. I would say our mutual favorite prospect at this point. I fucking love this guy. I'm not even going to give him a position. I'm going to say Alabama DB Brian Branch.
Yeah.
Brian Branch has my favorite film of the draft. If you only go watch one person's film, watch Brian Branch. Watching him destroy screens and come up in the run game and lay out running backs in the SEC was just like a pleasure to watch on film. I've never seen someone blow up screens the way that he does. It's beautiful. So he's listed as a safety. He played like deep safety, strong safety, outside corner, slot corner, linebacker, edge, and probably a whole host of other positions for Alabama in his career. He was a 4-star prospect who had an immediate impact as a freshman at Alabama, which should tell you something. His game within 5 yards of the line of scrimmage reminds me of one of my guys from last year, Jalen Petrie, who I would like to tell you led all safeties in tackles in the NFL this season with 146.
Yeah.
Part of that because the defense in front of him in Houston is not that great, but
it's bad. It's like more porous than a strainer.
Yes. So they needed him to make a lot of those tackles, but like one of the things I loved about Petrie coming out last year was that he had 22 tackles for a loss as a safety. Brian Branch's stats aren't quite that incredible. He had 14 tackles for a loss, but that's a shit ton for a safety still.
We talked about this before we went on air. If you didn't take Brian Branch, then I was going to have to move someone because he would have been on my list. For me, like he's a top 10 player for me in this draft. Point blank period. And I don't know that he's 10.
Yeah, having basically being like diet Jalen Petrie around the line of scrimmage, but also having the ability, like elite coverage ability.
Yeah.
That's insane.
Well, and I'll ask you this from what you've watched. Is he the smartest defender in this draft? Because I think he is.
I will say from an like reading an offense standpoint, I think that he reads offenses better than any other player in this draft.
Yeah.
I really think he does. And to be like that polished at those types of things.
Yeah.
Being like he's a junior, he's coming out as like a 20-year-old.
Yeah.
To be able to read it that good. I mean, God, I love guys who are productive. 90 tackles last season, 14 for a loss, 3 sacks, 2 picks, 7 pass breakups. Hyper productive. NFL.com graded him as the number 1 safety in terms of production score. His weaknesses, again, this is like the same thing that you're always going to hear from me. It says not an elite athlete for the position. Man coverage needs works, and he's a little undersized. And this is kind of what I wanted to talk about, is that I feel like we still draft guys from like the early to mid 2000s lens of like a safety has to be 6'3" and 225 pounds or else he's undersized. And that the game has changed so much since then. And now we play in space, and you have to have like a diverse skill set to be a successful safety in the league. And that the size, the ideal safety size is not the same as it was in the early 2000s.
Mm-hmm.
But guys get graded that way still. And it drives me insane.
Yeah.
Drives me crazy every draft. Brian Branch is just a really fucking good football player.
Yeah. So
he's very good at football.
Yeah. You give me the guy that has a 10th of a second faster 40 time, or the guy who's going to be 2 steps closer to where he's going to need to be because he knows what's going on before the play. I'm taking the latter every day, because that 10th of a second is not going to make up those 2 steps.
This is the thing that drives me insane every draft season. And like, we talked about the quarterbacks in depth last week, but we didn't really talk about this point.
Yeah.
Is that like, I have 15 or 16 weeks, whatever it is, of film of Bryce Young playing quarterback and being an excellent quarterback. And he's the number one prospect in the draft the whole season while we are playing football.
Yeah.
And then CJ Stroud throws in shorts. And all of a sudden he jumps to being the number one pick.
Yeah.
And it's like, I honestly I think the combine is important. I think the pro days are important. It's a good data point. But you're telling me I watched Brian Branch play 14 games and he was fucking awesome. And because he's not like prototypical size and doesn't run like a blazing fast 40, you're knocking him down your board.
Yeah.
Like, it doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah. Watch the tape. Is he where he needs to be when the ball is there? He's always there. He's always there. Like, he is the thing in the night in like every horror movie for wide receivers.
Yeah.
You want that on your defense.
I love him. I will be very happy if he becomes a Patriot.
Yeah. I would be shocked if he gets past that pick.
His scouting report, the top things on there: versatile defender, high level run defender, high football IQ.
Yep.
It's like, I know that he's not the prototypical size, but like we said, he's probably the smartest defender in this draft. And I will take that 10 times out of 10 over the guy who runs like a 4.2 but can't cover for shit.
We got to put that in perspective of this is a guy who's 21 right now. Imagine what he can accomplish in the NFL with high-level coaching and probably somehow even more resources than he had at Alabama. Like, the guy's gonna be great. I mean, I think his ceiling is still very high. I do not subscribe to the idea that every player's ceiling is determined by their physical attributes. Those things can certainly help. There's a reason why a lot of people get very excited about Anthony Richardson. However, a player's potential is far more likely to be determined by what they put into making themselves better. And we don't have to like guess about that with Brian Branch. He's already shown it.
Yeah. You show me a player who does what he does on film.
Yeah.
Show me one more player
whose
film is as good as Brian Branch's in this draft.
Like this, I mean, if anyone wants to argue this with me, they are welcome to be objectively wrong. But Brian Branch is the safest player in this draft.
Yeah, I agree with you. Let's do quick hitters. So give me we'll go back and forth. You give me a guy, give me like one or two lines about why you like him, and I'll give you one. This is now we're getting to the part of the list where I don't know what Matt's gonna say. This is besides the first guy, this is the live reaction portion of the podcast.
Yeah, so my first guy is Georgia tight end Darnell Washington. He is 6'7", 265 pounds. The man is an absolutely incredible run blocker, and he's a pretty good, reliable safety blanket as a pass catcher, which with maybe a little bit of upside to get better there. What really sold him to me was you watch him do that sled exercise that all the tight ends do at the combine. Every other player, you see the sled kind of turn from side to side as they are churning their legs. That didn't happen once with Darnell Washington because his core is so fucking strong. That man is going to demolish edge rushers, linebackers, whoever you put in front of him to block. And in a run heavy scheme, he will be the unsung hero of that offense.
Take him and Dalton Kincaid. They'll make up for each other's weaknesses. My first quick hitter is Iowa linebacker Jack Campbell. I actually wanted to go Noah Sewell as a linebacker for my list. And when I started looking at the linebackers, I was like, okay, I like Noah Sewell. I like Drew Sanders. I fell in love with Jack Campbell during the analysis. He is always in the right place. Always. Yeah. He was also PFF's #1 rated coverage linebacker. He's a true sideline to sideline linebacker. Kind of reminds me of like a diet version of Luke Kuechly. I'm not saying he's going to be as good as Luke Kuechly, but like Kuechly was a sideline to sideline guy. He could cover, he could track people down, but he wasn't a pass rusher. Actually never had more than 3 sacks in a season in his entire NFL career.
I mean, some of that might have just been like, not that he wasn't a pass rusher, but because he was so good that
I know
there was no point in rushing him.
Well, so that's kind of my thing with Jack Campbell is like, I don't think that he's going to put up big sack numbers or like huge tackle for loss numbers in the NFL, but like you want a dude who's always in the right place, can cover, and is going to like sideline to sideline tackle in the run game and screens and stuff like that. This is your dude. I like him a lot.
Yeah, it's like the opposite of Terrell Suggs. Like there was no point in dropping Terrell Suggs into coverage because you want him to get 20 sacks. So my next guy is actually one of the guys that you expected me to take. Cornerback from Maryland, Deonte Banks.
Oh, well, I should have saw that coming.
Yeah, obviously I have a very big soft spot for defensive backs. But Deonte Banks is very, very athletic cornerback who plays very physical press coverage. And while his technique can be maybe a little bit inconsistent, there's definitely some work to be done there. He's not quite on Witherspoon's level for me. Like the guy's film to me is very clearly worthy of a first round pick. And I mean, you're talking about a press corner who ran a 4.35 40. I know we talked a lot about how speed doesn't necessarily like make you a better player, but he has shown the ability to actually use his speed functionally. You have the speed when you miss your punch, and you're physical enough to derail the wide receiver speed. I'll take that all day.
I like it. My next quick hitter is Tyjae Spears, running back from Tulane. So this running back class is absolutely filthy.
Yeah.
From top to bottom. And, we talk about not drafting them in the first round all the time. And one of the reasons that we're saying like, hey, don't take Bijan Robinson with a top 10, top 15 pick is that like you can get guys like Tyjae Spears in day 2. I had trouble just picking one running back. There was so many. I was like, like so many guys I liked. And I was like, I just got to pick one for the list. My tiebreaker was, again, the big fish, small pond theory. Yeah. The refresher for you guys. I kind of mentioned it earlier, but when a school comes out of nowhere to have their best season ever, I look at guys on that roster and I'm like, okay, like there are good football players here. Tulane made the Cotton Bowl and beat USC this past season in a thrilling Cotton Bowl. And Spears led the way, 1,837 total yards and 21 total touchdowns this season for him. So hyper productive, including 220 yards and 4 touchdowns against USC in the Cotton Bowl, which was the best team they played all season. The main knock on him was that he had a lack of experience in the passing game, but that was more just because of how he was used at Tulane. He went to the Senior Bowl and absolutely grilled every single linebacker in the passing drills. Like embarrassed all of the linebackers at the Senior Bowl. So it's not a he can't do it. It's just that he wasn't asked to do it at Tulane. But
Yeah.
the skills there. The comp you're gonna love this. The comp I keep seeing for him is Aaron Jones. So
Yeah. I mean, I'll take Aaron Jones any day.
yeah, I think most people would take Aaron Jones. So
Yeah.
we'll see if he ends up being that good, but I like him. He's my favorite running back, not named Bijan Robinson for obvious reasons.
My last one, to this point, we have not yet, even once, given our love to the Hog Mollies. My last pick is offensive tackle Darnell Wright from Tennessee. Absolute road grader. The guy is exactly what you're looking for in any sort of power run game. And he can come into the NFL this year and start at either right tackle or at guard. So he's got some versatility there. What really sold me on him is if you go watch that Bama game this year. Now, granted, I am lower on Will Anderson than most because I don't think we saw the same Will Anderson this year that we saw last year. But still, Will Anderson is a very talented prospect, and he locked him up. Like he put him in a cage, and he was there for the entire fucking game. Will Anderson did absolutely nothing against Darnell Wright. That's not nothing.
I like it. My final guy, I pulled this up on my phone so I wouldn't get the name wrong. Tuli Peloto, edge rusher from USC.
Yeah.
I think that sometimes we overthink the draft. This guy just led the NCAA in sacks and was second in the NCAA in tackles for a loss while playing at a Power 5 school. Also racked up 56 pressures this season, according to PFF. And he did all of this at 6'4", 290 pounds. One of the issues with him is that like he's kind of a tweener at the NFL level. He's kind of too big to play edge. He's kind of too small to play inside. Do you know who else they said that about? They said that about Jonathan Allen when he came out of Alabama. Washington moved him inside, and he's become one of the best pass rushing interior linemen in the entire NFL.
Yep.
So I think Tuli kind of is like, Jonathan Allen's going to be like the very, very high end because he's one of the best players in the NFL, one of the underrated dudes. I think of another guy that I liked from a couple of drafts ago, Gregory Rousseau, who's been very good for the Bills. Tuli is going to be a guy that you can move all over your defensive line. He can play edge. He can play defensive tackle kind of on the interior. USC also had him stand up and play a little like stand up edge, little like drop back linebacker kind of stuff. He's very versatile. Yeah. And the production is unparalleled. If like I said, led the entire NCAA in sacks with 13.5. He was second in tackles for a loss, but everybody else, like the one dude who was ahead of him played at Liberty. The other guys behind him are like at Eastern Michigan and like other smaller schools. So to put up those numbers at a Power 5 school is like, the guy's a good football player.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, like sometimes the numbers just don't lie. And it's hard to argue with any of those at this point. I will throw one more out there just because last week we specifically really only talked about the big four quarterbacks. I think there's a maybe late day 2, early day 3 guy that I think deserves a little bit of love. And that's DTR, UCLA quarterback. Really, really athletic guy. And he's not ready. I mean, if he were thrown onto the field like early this year, I don't think he would look like a total disaster. But um, he is exactly what you would target if you are really concerned about risk with Anthony Richardson, but you like the upside because while he's not as tall as Richardson, I think he's 6'1". Like he's still athletic, very strong. He's got an absolute cannon. Like he has, if we're going by tools, which we've already talked about how meaningless that is, but going by tools, he has a higher ceiling than any quarterback in this draft not named Anthony Richardson because his tools are just that good. And I think if you take a fourth round pick on that guy as a developmental quarterback, I mean, give it 2 years and I mean, you might be very, very pleased with your return on investment.
Yeah, as long as we're throwing out extra guys, I want to mention Devon Pace Jr., linebacker from Cincinnati. Brett Coleman did a really good video on the top 10 defensive gems of this draft. And in the video, he said, Devon Pace Jr. does more linebackery things than any other linebacker in this draft. So, dude's a baller. But that is it for us. As always, Fouled Out can be found on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Pocket Cast, Overcast, anywhere you get your podcast. You can hit us up on Twitter at Fouled Out Sports. You can see Matt throw out more draft takes on Twitter at Matador_defense. And you can find our videos on TikTok at Fouled Out Sports Podcast. It's a long name, but you can't miss it. We had a bunch of good videos from the last podcast, probably a couple from this one as well. So NBA play-in games the next couple of days. Playoffs start Saturday. And then the NHL playoffs are coming up soon. So lots of great sports stuff to keep an eye on while we wait for the draft at the end of April.
Yeah, it's really good stuff while we wait for the Great Dead Period, which we always have good content for. But from a watching live sports standpoint, it's not great.
Yeah, but don't worry. We got things and stuff. All right, my friend. I will talk to you soon.
Later.
All right. Bye, guys.
Bye, Robin.
Bye, Mom.